Well, welcome everyone. We've got our evening seminar today, which is accelerating software delivery with AI and shift-left security. Now, obviously, the meat of that topic I'll leave to Mark here and Juanita, but it's obviously a hot topic at the moment about how generative AI is then affecting the rest of our the rest of our work, and in this case, our work being software delivery. So, I mean, firstly, obviously, really glad you turned out, because it's hard to get everyone out on a freezing cold. Oops, I think I've just pulled that out of the wall. That is not.
You fused that.
No, I haven't fused it. I've just kicked the cable. It is freezing tonight, but so I'm Andrew. I'm up here because I'm the one that talks a lot, not because I know any more than anyone else. But this is our first evening seminar that we've hosted as 345 Technology, and I'm really glad you come out, because we've been like nervous teenagers, sort of having our first party and hoping everyone's going to turn up. And I mean, if you want to feel young again, there's better ways of doing it. Seriously. And a bit about me. Most of you know me, but those of you don't. But I'm Andrew, but I wear a couple of hats in 345 Technology. So I kind of wear the CEO hat, which means I go out and about and do this sort of thing, and talk and look outside the business, but also I look after sales and marketing. And I think that's because Paul and James are far more technically good than me. So I got given that. But all of us come from a technology background, so we do know what we're doing in that sphere. And in terms of 345 Technology, we're based in Winchester, in Hampshire, which is the ancient capital of England, not only of Wessex but of England. And Paul can tell you a lot more about that. But right from I don't know how many years, how many centuries ago, but the
10th century.
King Arthur's round table is allegedly there. There is a round table in Winchester Cathedral. It's supposed to be King Arthur's, but who knows, because it's just a round table. Obviously, we're Azure specialists, and we are leaders in application and data integration of Azure. And we do the full engineering lifecycle, and effectively the Microsoft partnership is a really important thing to us, and we're really happy that Microsoft is supporting us here this evening. And we work in a lot of sectors, because what we do isn't really sector specific, but we do a lot of work in banks and insurance. We do a lot of work in retail. We do a lot of work in energy and renewables, and also in sort of manufacturing and engineering, including drinks manufacturing, which is a great niche to be in. So. Although, we'd love more of that, but if you want to talk to Steve and Tim later, they can tell you a lot more about that. So just going back a little bit, so just talk a little bit about the journey we've been on. If we go back to 2019, myself, Paul and James, we'd had a bit of a rough time, and we'd had some things that hadn't really worked out, and we were scratching our heads, and we wrote a list of 10 things that we wanted to do about our business when we founded 345 Technology. But one of the things that was really important to us, we realised that values was at the core of what we did, and we've been living by 4 values since then, which is that we treat people right, we do things properly, we make a difference, and we push to improve. And those are the kind of the guiding values that we've got. And that's kind of permeated through everything else. So quality, really important. So we've actually got really high test capability that a lot of companies our size don't have. And really treating people right, it's all about trusted relationships, because a lot of the people in the room tonight we go way back with, and it's really great to see you, but it's all about, it's really important to us that we keep, obviously some of you we haven't seen for a little while, but we're really happy to keep, that we've got so many people in our network that we really feel we've got that kind of relationship with, deep technical expertise, not so much me, but the other guys. And that's all built on great people, because ultimately, being a software house, our people really are our product, and we live and die by the capabilities that they've got. And again, we talked about the Microsoft partnership being the core of what we do. And you might kind of say, well, where's this relevant? And I'm going to get onto that. So we do lots of things, because doing software, we can turn our hand to a lot of things, but really we specialise in application data integration. So there's all that integration stuff, the data platform stuff, moving, application modernisation, which is a code word for moving stuff into the cloud. But underpinning all that, and what's highlighted here is it's really the software engineering side of it. And software engineering is a funny old thing because you may not realise it. I may look quite young, but I'm actually not. And because I started programming in the 80s, on when Clive Sinclair was still selling stuff, and I started programming the Microsoft platform in the 90s. VB5 I think was my first Microsoft product, and then VB6, and then .NET. And it was almost like every 2 years, after that, there was a new iteration. But software delivery has been going on this kind of incremental change path. And and again with software delivery process, 2000 I was taught rational unified process, and then Agile and Scrum and extreme programming and all those things came out. And now we're doing all the how do we do Agile at scale and safe Agile and those sort of things. But they're all building on each other, and so we've been on this incremental change path, and it's been really, really productive. But then, generative AI's come out, and then suddenly it's like bang. It's like we're at that kind of step change thing at the moment where things that weren't possible a while ago are suddenly possible. So it's like we're on the launch pad at the moment, and the rockets are just firing up, and we don't quite know where it's going to be, but we know it's really going to go somewhere. And we're not quite at the point where you can wave a magic wand and software appears, but compared to where we were in the 80s, it probably feels like that. I'm also going to just take a bit of a time perspective, because again, having been through, we've been around the block a few times, but if we go back to sort of 2008, Microsoft launched Azure. So Paul, James and I, we were at PDC in Los Angeles when Azure was launched, and it was like, we didn't really expect it, because we didn't have any inside track. We just turned up, and then they said, hey, you're going to use compute like you use electricity. And you're going to rent servers by the minute in a data center where you won't even know where they are. It was like, just like, no one could get their head around it. And it probably took 5 or 10 years for that really to move. And now it seems obvious, and now it seems like, well, we'll just spin up some cloud stuff, and when we don't need it, we'll take it back down again. I mean, that kind of thing. But back then, that was really revolutionary. And now, if there was a customer came to us earlier in the year, and they wanted to do a project, and they actually wanted to buy servers, actually servers that you get from Dell and you plug into the wall. It's like what planet are you on? Whereas, back in 2008, if you didn't want servers, it was, no one could get their head around it. And now, if you do want them, so that's the kind of that's the journey we've been on. But now here we are. We're in 2023. We've had a widespread launch of generative AI, and it's really got that same feeling that with the public imagination has been caught by ChatGPT, and obviously OpenAI and Microsoft investing in it, Elon Musk investing in it, that sort of thing, and Microsoft are bringing out the whole range of co-pilots and that sort of thing. But this is just the it's the inflection point. It's the moment when everything changes the next time around. So for me, the cloud 2008, that was a complete step change in another direction, and we're almost here 15 years later, and that's another point where it's just all going off at different in another to another level, and with that as an introduction, I'm going to hand over to Mark and Juanita, and they're going to talk about accelerating software delivery with AI and shift left security. So we click on Mark. I wasn't actually expecting that. I'm just like the nibbles at the start. This is the main course.
Very good. Okay, so thanks Andrew and 345 team for inviting us, and thanks for everybody coming out. It's quite a small number of people in, make it interactive, ask questions as we go along. So rather than it just a broadcast, so just shout if you want to ask anything. You said this was working. Avoidance of doubt. I'm Mark. This is Juanita. We're both developer specialists, so it's a new role this year, and it's all about kind of re-energizing our relationship with developers. I think we've always been a really strong development company, but maybe in recent years, maybe our focus has been on other things, so we've created this new role. There's 4 of us in the team, and we're kind of looking after the UK. So let's start with this picture. Any kind of movie buffs, Spider-Man fans, do you recognise this? Daily Bugle, headquarters of the Daily Bugle. It's the area of New York, Flatiron District, so you recognise it. And the little clock in the corner is the Trinity clock. So quite timely for what I'm going to talk about, having a clock in there, because the message is time passes, things change. If we look at exactly the same area 100 plus years ago and 120 years ago, exactly the same place, we see the Flatiron building. And actually, if you look closely, you can still see the Trinity clock in there. Now, what's the 2 differences in the photos? In the top one, it's got horses and carts, and in the bottom one, there's not one horse or cart in there. So there's a kind of message in there. Think about how over 20 years, very short period of time, technology really changed the world. So think about the blacksmith. Blacksmiths were no longer needed. The guy that was shoveling up the manure, sweeping up after, no longer needed. And then the organisation that was selling carts and horses, they're no longer needed unless they was able to reinvent themselves and take into account the technology changes. So the message here is, the only thing constant is change, and a key for organisations to survive any technology change is be aware of disruptive technology and also make use of talent. There's a little quote there from Charles Darwin. It talks about life. The life is the species that survives is the one that's going to be the most adaptable to change, and that's very similar for businesses. You have to adapt to change. And so the only thing constant is change. That's always been the case. What is different now? And I'd say probably what is different from any other time in has been really the rate of change. Things are really speeding up, and it's it's the investment in software that is really causing this change. So, organisations, it's fierce business challenges. There's competition out there, and it's really the ones that are going to survive are those that invest in software, so they can kind of innovate, differentiate, and kind of disrupt. So software innovation is at the core of innovation. And really, successful companies are going to be those that invest in their developers. And developers have got to have kind of best-in-class tools, platforms. They've got to have education, and they've got to have kind of real strong kind of culture of collaboration and kind of sharing. And it is those that kind of invest in the developers and give them the right platforms. They're going to be the ones that kind of survive in this, survive and thrive in this new world. We kind of touched on this earlier. Microsoft have really always been a strong developer, tools and platform company, right from many years ago when Bill Gates, the first product was kind of BASIC. He was actually writing the BASIC interpreter on the plane as he was going to show someone, and he had to turn up with this software that he was writing as he was visiting. And platforms have always been key to Microsoft. It's not just the dev tools, it's the platform. So, started off with things like MS-DOS, and then it becomes the Windows platform, then it became the .NET platform, and .NET starts to run on various other kind of platforms. And then today, it's the Azure platform. So we kind of talk about Azure's not just the cloud, I'd say it's the platform. Okay, just quick kind of advert type slide, but just to make sure everybody's aware of Visual Studio. Visual Studio is like the bedrock of our developer platform. I just want to kind of call out, a lot of people aren't aware of this, but actually the Visual Studio subscription is quite a compelling deal. Because if you look at the actual cost of Visual Studio, it's $450 per developer. But if you actually look at the benefits that you get GitHub that's worth $252. You get Azure DevOps that's worth $70. But probably the real interesting ones is this. You get $600 of Azure credits, and it's only cost you $450. So that alone kind of outweighs the cost of Visual Studio. You can also burn Azure at dev test pricing, and there's an example there. You can actually run at 57% less than the production cost. A few other things you get with it, so it's a compelling deal. Let's talk about kind of DevOps. So DevOps is this engine that drives innovation, and you can develop software much faster than you could with kind of traditional ways of developing software. And many companies have had to kind of pivot and kind of develop software much faster than they traditionally did. A good example of that is Microsoft. We traditionally was developing things like Windows Server, and it would take 3 years to develop. And by the time we developed it, the world had moved on, and people wanted various things, and we would say, "Oh, you've got to wait for the next version," which is another 3 years away. Now it's all about cloud cadence. So every maybe 3-4 weeks, we're now developing and dropping software. The only way we could have done that is to kind of pivot the company and use in the kind of DevOps type methodologies. So it's all about kind of dev code. So we've got the inner loop and the outer loop. So the inner loop is where the developers are kind of iteratively developing, testing code. And then there's the outer loop where you're kind of publishing that code, and then it drives the next iteration. So you're basically monitoring, you're getting kind of feedback, and then you're using the planning to drive the next iteration. So Microsoft, we kind of confuse things a little bit by owning 2 platforms here, and just kind of explain what's happening there. So we had to have a great product with Azure DevOps, and then we confused things by buying GitHub. Why did we buy GitHub when we already had that? Well, I think GitHub is a very strong brand, but it's also a lot of places where kind of developers gravitate to. So it's kind of hosting a lot of big open source type application and software. There was talk about us merging the products. It doesn't seem to be that is the case. Both products are going to be around. There's no plans to get a lot of kind of FUD in the marketplace saying Azure DevOps is end of life. That's not the case. It's got a roadmap. We're going to show some things later around security, just showing that we are still investing in Azure DevOps. There is some interoperability between the 2 products, but if anybody's invested in Azure DevOps, be reassured Azure DevOps is around. Will be around for a long time. Okay, let's now talk about GitHub Copilot. I'm going to pass the Winnie to do the slides, and then I'm going to demo. Does anybody use Copilot? Do you like it?
Oh yeah.
Does everybody else know what it is, or is it new? It's had a lot of noise in them. People know?
Only marketing spiel.
Okay, we'll show it. So pass the Winnie to do some talking on it, explain what it is, and then I'm going to demo.
Alright, thank you, Mark. So, GitHub Copilot. Like Mark said, there's like a uproar of Copilot. I was actually on the train yesterday and I saw an ad about Copilot, and I was like, oh, okay, it's gone here too. But yeah, GitHub Copilot is our AI pair programmer. As we know, AI has taken the world by storm. And generally, we're now thinking of how to make the lives of developers easier, and what we can do to make their jobs more pleasant. So GitHub Copilot is your AI pair programmer. You have probably heard about ChatGPT. Interesting to note that GitHub Copilot was actually around before ChatGPT, but the way ChatGPT came and just, blew up within like less than 6 months. But yeah, GitHub Copilot is the first large language module that uses the OpenAI Codex, and essentially what it does is suggest code and entire functions. It's trained on, like I said, it's a large language model. It's trained on lots of lines of code, and it's generally just, like the name suggests, Copilot. It's not to come in and write the code for you. It's not to come in and take the entire load of work away from you. But what it's here for is to lighten the burden, to share the work. And it's, like I said, it's artificial intelligence, so it's not completely always correct. So you can't just say, oh, Copilot is doing everything for me. You, as a developer, would come in and also assess and look through what Copilot is suggesting to make sure that it's in line with what you're after. Something that we really like about Copilot is that it's available in many of developers' favorite editors. It's available in Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, in the web, in GitHub Code Spaces, JetBrains, and Yoho. There's that link there if you want to find out more about the features of Copilot. But moving on, so the way Copilot works is so you feed Copilot context. This context will be in the form of your words, your human language, and it's also in the form of the files that you have open in the editor. So Copilot gets that context and provides you suggestions. So the way it is when you have collected or given the context, Copilot will then obviously consult its, I'll call it the backend. It will consult what's been trained on and give you suggestions based on that. And it's important to note that the way data is shared with Copilot is that it's only stored for the moment or for however long it takes for Copilot to give you suggestions. So once the suggestions have been given to you, that code is deleted and it's not used to retrain the model. So that is how basically Copilot does its thing. And it's just like using, I don't know if anyone has used the language translator. When you put what you want to be translated in English, the language translator would search its backend and maybe identify things here and there, things that are familiar in the trained model, and give suggestions based on that. So think of Copilot again as like a language translator. Any questions so far?
How does it learn? So in the 90s and noughties, the code builders were deeply inefficient. So this is learning from the code and making it more efficient. So if you're not retaining the code, how is it learning?
So it's trained on the code, open source code on GitHub, code that is publicly on GitHub. And it's always been retrained with the public stuff. So especially with Copilot Business, it definitely does not retrain on business code. What is
so you can flag whether you want it to learn or retain or not.
So I think for Mark, correct,
Yeah.
help there.
So today it is trained on billions of lines of public code, and it won't use any of your code to retrain the model. Now, our very last slide is going to talk about some announcements that we made last week, and that is going to jumping to the slide, we're going to change that, and for your use only, you can start to use Copilot on your own code bases. But as of kind of today, it's all public, and it is billions of lines of public code, and it will protect your IP. Nothing of your code will be persisted or reused to train the model.
So will it use the code to build the context? So if I've got my own code base, then at least to build a context. Of course, it's been trained on public code, but
Yeah, so there's
there
a,
might be practices that might be very specific to the solution that I'm using. Will it use them or?
so there's a plugin inside the developer editor, and it has to build up that context, and that is kind of the secret sauce of that is to what is it to build up the prompt to send out to the engine. So it's going to look at your code that you've got open. Now you can encourage it to see wider things by opening up extra tabs. So for example, if you open up some of the, in a .NET world, if you open up the project file, it then understands that you're working on this version of .NET. The other thing is, if you're familiar how these things work, you kind of create a context with tokens. There is a limit to the size of the token, so it can't send up everything, and that is where the intelligence is in that extension to build up enough to give the context to send up. And it sends back a response, and it will use the history to build the next response. So it's building up. Yeah.
So what is the context you pass? Are you writing some general language like I'm doing this X function and give the response for that? Because no, in the real world,
Again, it is the secret sauce. What is Copilot building? You know, it's having to create enough knowledge in that context. So when it sends up to the engine says, "Oh, I suspect this would be a good prompt to give back to you."
the example I'm giving you, like in the real example, you have collections. There is a collection being passed in one of the functions. Can you understand that those aspects unless it has seen the whole file or?
So it can see the whole file, but it can't send up the whole file because there is a limit to the way these things work. So it has to use its intelligence to build up a sensible context to send up.
In this example on the screen, was the input the actual function line, or which it looks like from the sort of
Yeah, so
highlighting?
I think the build was like, this is what happens, and then when you hit, and I'll demonstrate this, what the experience is, but as you hit enter, the next line, it will then, actually no, so you've keyed that in, and then that's the bit that's coming back and accepting.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether the comment was,
Yeah, I think
whether
maybe,
it's comment and build the rest of it, or what's
yeah, it's not very
highlighted.
clear, it looks like that, because what actually happens
Creates
is,
the function.
the prompt is light grey, and that's not light grey, so that's kind of like, once it's been accepted, but
Yeah, so what it is the context would be the commenting. So if you, in that previous slide, or even here as well, you can see the comment, you put in the comment, and then the first line is like the more you prompt it, the more it gives to you, type of thing. So you can start typing and it finishes off based on what it thinks you're trying to do.
and there is a skill for the developer to learn how to do things to send up good prompts.
So what else is in a context? Well, so obviously it's trying to learn, so it's learning information about you, so you don't want it to know about what you're doing. You need to know what the context looks like.
So we don't expose what the context is that's going up.
It's just encrypted all the way through, so nobody can get to it. Nobody can.
So we've got a slide later that will say it is all end-to-end encrypted.
Right.
And nothing is ever persisted in storage.
I'm just thinking of from a security angle.
Yeah. I mean, we have worked with people that have got rules in place. It comes under export. You know,
Yeah.
where is this engine? Well, currently the engine is running in the US. So those sending up context does come under export controls.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Are there plans to have other engines?
There is, but there are other locations. In fact, there is already a couple in Europe. They've got them in Europe. What they haven't yet got is the way that you can pin it to only use that one.
Right.
I think what they're doing is they're getting it in and making sure it's robust, and then they'll have the ways to say we'll only use the European data centers for this.
Thanks.
Will it show more suggestions or just with the context just one suggestion directly?
Sorry, I didn't quite absorb.
Can it show more suggestions or just one suggestion for that particular
Oh,
contest?
no, it shows multiple, so you can,
Multiple.
yeah, you can search through and see what is more likely like what you're asking for. So yeah, we offer the code suggestions and it's contextualized to your project. And the truth is, the more you, like Mark said, the more tabs that you have open, the more context it has. And it gets to a point where Copilot actually starts to give you suggestions, or the more you code, it actually starts to give you suggestions in your style of code.
So because it is taking from the GitHub public repositories, and sometimes probably it may suggest a bad coding as well. So is it like in most suggestions, will it actually segregate this is the good line of the code which you can use it, this shouldn't be used, because in GitHub people would like to code in a certain way which probably is not good in terms of the performance, or it is a bad coding?
So I think with the good or bad, it's if it finds, for example, if you want to write a function that checks prime numbers, and if it's seen that there's a lot of code written in a particular way, it doesn't necessarily, you can't tell if that's good or bad. So I think that's up to the developer to look through it and, you know, identify. So you wouldn't just click tab and accept. You would read it through first and see if that's what you're actually after.
Just one thing. We're going to talk later about code security, and GitHub's got those sort of things. We're told that it does filter out known bad code as it. That said, do not rely on it. We would still suggest you have proper code scanning tools that we will talk about later. So it shouldn't prompt poor code, but don't rely on that.
Can you get any stats out of it at the end of it? So say you've got a team of people being peer reviewed, and you maybe want to check one dev or give one dev a bit of help because they're regularly getting poor code.
So we haven't got it down to the individual developer. There is telemetry that we can show you. Like, for example, you've accepted 25% of all recommendations, and that's injected 20,000 lines of code into your code base. We're not down to like reporting that Fred's using this and it's not. You know, we're not down to the individual code layer.
Fred could do with the training course.
Yeah. and that is the interesting thing. That I'm not sure we've still got work to do maybe on it, but we show that there is a definite improvement in people writing code faster. What we haven't yet is what is the code of poor quality.
Are the suggestions ranked? So let's say you ask for a number of code, and there's 5 potential solutions to that, and everyone picks, say, the third one.
Yeah.
Does that then go back to train the large language model?
I don't believe so.
Shouldn't.
But I mean, we're in early stages. I mean, that makes lots and lots of sense, and no doubt somebody is going to be looking. One of the things is there's like thumbs up and thumbs down to in the chat, which will show how we're using that at the moment. I don't know. But
There's
it
a
makes
natural
sense.
extension of that, and then you'll start to pay for your rankings at your code level. And being like a Bing search or a Google search. Say Bing.
Just from a timing point of view, I'll skip over the next two. Do the next slides really quickly, and then we'll demonstrate this otherwise as well.
Okay. So yeah, the Copilot chat is more like a ChatGPT style. So you type in complete human language, explain what you would like Copilot to do for you, and it gives you explanations as well as code. So one thing I find it really good for is pseudocode. So if I know the pseudocode but I don't exactly know the code, I would just break it down, put it in the pseudocode. I normally write in short paragraphs, and Copilot would, analyze that and give me the code for that. I find it really also useful it's also very useful for unit test generation. It's useful for making your code more robust, explaining, translating from one coding language to another. So it does, I like to say, test its limits. Because I sometimes I'll just go into the editor and say, oh, let's see if Copilot can do this for me. And most of the times it can. So Yeah, that's actually what that is. I'm skipping over that because Mark will talk more about that in the demo.
Just one question.
Yeah.
Can you set like naming conventions and coding guidelines, some kind of, to say, those you will see organizations have their own sometime own naming conventions. And
Mhm.
can you set those things to say, give the response in that naming convention or the other, or it's whatever you got and then you change it after?
Yeah, I'd say no, because it's trained on public code. However, that's what, again, referring to the last slide that we'll do, that's when it starts training on your code base, that's when it can start picking up your coding standards and know how you've done it. And so
Okay.
as of today, no.
So it will learn from it rather than, there's no way you can feed it up front
Yeah.
and then it can give you response. Yeah, it
Yeah.
will learn from it and then.
Yeah.
But another thing to say as well is, let's say you have a lot of files open and you would like code generated. Most of the time, it can use the variables that are already in your files. Yeah. So I think it all depends on context. Yep. So I think Mark would show the demo now.
Right. That's interesting. Okay. One of the challenges of demoing this is every time you demo it, it comes back with different answers. So having something nicely scripted, it's not predictable what comes back. And the other thing, I would normally be doing this on Teams with a second monitor, and I have all my nicely scripted code rather than you watch me type. I have that hidden from you, but you're going to see what I'm doing. So here's Visual Studio, and let's start with a prompt. Let's go. Okay, so I've got an empty folder starting with nothing. I'm going to fire up Visual Studio. And Visual Studio has an extension, and I know it's running because I've got this little thing down here saying the Copilot is on, so I could turn it off, but I want it on. The chat is this extension here. And there's also another extension called Copilot Lab, so this is all experimental stuff, but it's like where you can block your code and say make this more robust and it'll do extra checks and whatever. So I've got Copilot enabled. Let's just start, and we have to prompt it. And if I look in here, I've got no files currently created. So I'm going to say to Copilot, I'm a .NET developer, I'm using version 8. I want to create a single API application, but I also want a test project. I want a reference from my test project to the API project, because I want to do some unit testing. What are the .NET commands to scaffold a solution? And by the way, I want the files called color. Okay? So it's going to use that, and this is where, fingers crossed, it comes back with a good one for a demo. So it gives a comment, and then hopefully it's going to give me my code. So I'm just going to kind of copy that there, bring up a command prompt, paste it in, and it's going to scaffold my API app. Create a test project as well. Okay, so if I go over to here, I've got my two applications. So I've started with absolutely nothing, and I've suddenly got the skeleton of my code and of the unit test. So I'm going to go into the projects and have a look at this, and kind of look at it and say, well, it's all about weather. And I actually want to do something with colors. So I want a kind of API to manage colors. So I'm just going to rip out all this stuff because that's irrelevant. But I've still got the kind of the core scaffolding. So again, you wouldn't normally see this, but saves me typing out. I'm just going to go back to this and say, I want a model to manage colors, and I want in there two fields, a name and a hex code. What do you suggest I do? I'll keep a blur, but the more important bit is the code. So let's just copy that in, and again, echoing what was said, Juanita said, don't just accept it, make sure it makes sense, because it might be wrong. Okay, so that looks good. Now what I also want to do is, I want to create 2 API routes. I want one to return all colours, and by the way, I want this database initialized with those 3 colours. And then secondly, I want a second API to insert a new colour. So that looks good, so let me just insert that in. So it's created me just a kind of a list to handle the colours. Remember I asked for red, yellow and blue, black as the default colours. I've got 2 routes, one for colours and one to insert a colour. Hopefully some of that looks quite familiar code. That's just getting back the list of my colours as a JSON file, and then that's going to actually add, so I'm going to pass. So this is a post API, going to insert a colour. Okay. So that was all using chat. I could also prompt it by just doing comments in here. So let's add a route. I want another route to add a random colour. That instantaneously come back with this suggestion. So I could have written that, I could have thought about that. Maybe it would take me a minute, 2 minutes to write a piece of code like that. Come back in 2 seconds. So, okay, next thing what I might want to do is, let's we're passing through a hex code, but I could, in that API, I could write all sorts of junk in there. So let's check it's a valid. Let's create a new file in here called color utilities. And the other way you can prompt it is say Control I, and it comes up. You can put your chat in there. So what I want to do is I want a new static class called that. I probably could do that without help there, but let's just accept that. And then what I want to do there is I want a validate function. So let's just take that code, check it makes sense. Anybody good at regex? Would you have known that was the regex to write a hex code validation? Guess some people could have done it, but that's
In fact, it's probably worth the whole thing just to be able to do regex.
yeah, validate. If you type validate email address, it comes back with a regex. It's interesting. Okay, and so that's my function to validate the hex code. If I go back to my code here, not that one, program, what I could do in there is say, where's it gone? I've got the wrong one open. Thank you. So I could do it in there again, just say, add hex code validation, hit return. That's interesting because it's used, hasn't used my, this is where it's kind of, I wanted to use the function I just did. So let's have another go, please. Okay,
Could you just feed the entire thing pseudocode?
Could I?
Could you feed it just pseudocode? Do you need the dev at all?
That was what I was expecting. And utilities does not exist in there. Interesting. Did I save that one? Okay, so I've really messed this up. For some reason it's not finding my utilities. That should be there. Any clever people see what I've done wrong?
Namespace?
Namespace. It should all handle the same namespace. That was it's a good call, but it should. So let's try it. So it is in there. So, and yet it isn't in there. What's that?
Try use Copilot to fix it.
So again?
Try use Copilot to fix it.
Trying to fix it. Yeah, that's good. I don't know. That's should.
It says missing an open row.
So let's start. And X. Don't know. Okay, let me skip that hex code validation, but just to kind of show that the code was, if I did .NET build, good, CD, run. As soon as I finish this, I'll probably realise what I've done wrong, why it's not finding that other function. Okay, so we've got so if I do this, colours. We've got our API that's returning all our colours. If I put Swagger in there, it's got a UI around it. So I've got my colours, post a new colour, so let's try it out. So what I can say is, anybody know that, this is an exam question, anybody know the hex code for Azure? B0FF. It's wrong, isn't it? It's B.
You've got two hashes in there as well.
Thank you. See, if I got the other bit working, that would have come back and said invalid hex code. So it's now added Azure in there. So if I now say get all colours, try it out, execute, we should have a list of 4 colours. And then if I do my random colour at the bottom, let's just at the bottom, give me a random colour out of the 4. If I try it out, execute, yellow. So it's a random colour. So I've got an API out pretty quick using Copilot. Let's just show one more thing, if I can get it to work. Remember we did a unit test So what I could say, this is the unit test. At the moment, it created the scaffolding, the skeleton of a unit test, but I need some unit tests in there. What I can say to it is, okay, write me a unit test using MS test to validate all the color utilities dot validate hex code function, and I need to test all case studies, all scenarios and edge cases. So it should look at the code and come up with okay, so it's put it all as one test, so it's basically, it's trying valid, invalid ones. Let's just ask it, please, we say please to AI, because it makes a difference. Separate, to separate, yeah, different tests. Again, it's got that problem, hasn't it?
This is the file extension coming into
Because quick fix.
It doesn't have a CS.
Have I done a typo or something? Is it as simple as that? Let me just put that in before but I don't think it needs namespaces because
You need to add a .cs file extension to come into this.
oh, did I not do that? Thank you. That's one reason.
That's a good call.
Thank you for spotting that one. That's still possible. That's missing a bracket. Is that right? So if I do Control C, CD dot net build. dir cd color dot test dot net test. And one failed. And actually if I do it okay. And what it would be, I know so that like two of those tests passed, one failed. And the one that failed was the edge case of testing for null. So if I go back to my function, and it's here, color utilities. Now, what we can say to Copilot is, it hasn't checked at me passing a null hex code. So I can say to Copilot here, make this piece of code more robust. And what has it done? That wasn't what I wanted it to do. It should really test it. Has that done it? Just checking null for null. So let's try that. Let's go back to the unit test. Let's rerun the unit test that was checking for a null case. If the gods are with us. That's worked. So that code, Copilot, I've said to it, make it more resilient, and it's gone and added extra null checks in there. I probably should start. There's loads. More I can do, but we've got to do code security. What time are we finishing? Like 2 minutes.
It's 15.
If we do another 15 minutes.
Yeah, another 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. So let's just quickly whiz through some slides. So cybercrime. I think we all know that cybercrime is a huge industry, lots of bad people out there attacking organisations of any size. Doesn't matter who you are, even if you're a good organisation, you're under attack. And you don't have to be super skilled these days to be an attacker, because there's a whole kind of market out there of selling exploits on the kind of dark web at really low cost. So the number of attackers out there is huge. And what attackers are doing is they're looking for vulnerabilities in anything, and if they can exploit it, they then get like a kind of beachhead or landing point that they can then start to move through your networks and start and unleash really bad things. And at the very least, they could cause severe financial impact. Worst case, it could cause business ruin, and then in kind of catastrophic cases, it could cause loss of life. And if you look at this, all the advantages are with the attacker. You've got to defend all points, where an attacker only has to find one. We've got to play by the rules. They can play dirty. You've got to be vigilant. They can attack at will. So, and then it gets even worse because of the number of attackers are out there. And what security is, it's all about protecting the business. And I think lots of organisations do a good job around securing the environment, securing the operations. But kind of maybe a forgotten point is securing the code. As I said, it's all about reducing risk in these different areas. So when it comes to securing the code, there's 3 things that we can do or should be doing. So the first one is, let's think about open source. Lots of organisations using open source now because it makes sense. Why write something if it already exists? The problem's been solved, let's just reuse that code. But the problem with open source is when you put in a library, you put in many other libraries, and each of those libraries could pull in many other libraries, and you end up with this huge complex chain of dependencies, and you end up, you don't know what code you're actually using or where it's actually originated from. And so the bad people are attacking popular open source libraries because they know that that will then get pulled into many other places. So there's this term, software bill of materials. Understand what code you're actually using, and really, because of that complexity of how much there is, you've got to have tooling in place that can report if there's a known vulnerability in that code. The other thing that is some software, open source, has got licensing constraints, how commercial organisations can use it, and there are certain licenses that your legal people won't want you to be using. Again, you need to have tooling in place to detect those certain license types. The second thing is code scanning. So, developers, they're often kind of rewarded by coding fast, or they don't have the skills to write resilient code. So again, you've got to have code kind of tooling in place that can help assist, identify poorly written code. So something like maybe a SQL injection attack, or something that's going to overflow a buffer or something. Let's have code scanning in place that can detect that. And then the third kind of area you need to protect is to make sure that you don't put secrets, things like connection strings or passwords or security tokens, into your code. Because once your code is in a repo, it's there forever. Even if you delete that file, it's still in the history. So you need code scanning to detect if you've already done it, but even better is if you can have your DevOps tooling preventing you to uploading it, so push protection. And then DevSecOps is kind of the next iteration of DevOps, and it's, we talked about the in and out of the loop, but if we can put security earlier into the software lifecycle rather than just writing your applications and then throwing them over the fence and saying now worry about security. Let's do security earlier in the software lifecycle. So if you can do that, you kind of doing security as you go in, you're building more resilient code, it's more cost effective, and you're just accelerating delivery. So, talk about security is all about reducing risk. Those are the 3 things that we can do, and we've got this now in advanced security. It's always been in GitHub, but we've now got it for Azure DevOps as well. And with that, we'll pass on to Juanito, who's going to show some of this.
Yeah.
So, like Mark mentioned, we have advanced security for GitHub and we now have it for Azure DevOps. So with GitHub Advanced Security, I think all the magic happens in this security tab up here. But first things first, for it to carry out all its features, you need to turn it on. And turn it on, it helps that turning it on is very simple. So in GitHub, to turn it on, it's as simple as going to settings in your repository and go to code security and analysis over here. Then you just need to enable as you wish. So you can enable the dependency management tools, you can enable the code scanning tools and the secret scanning tools. With code scanning, you also use GitHub Actions to set up the workflow so that maybe whenever a pull request is made, or merge request, a pull request is made, the workflow is activated and it checks and scans the code for you. So an example here, in the security tab, we can see over here that we have 4 dependable alerts, 23 code scanning alerts, and 1 secret scanning alert. If we look into the dependable, which basically does the dependency scanning, we are told which dependencies are in our code. So if you click on this one, for example, it gives you a summary of what this dependency is. It tells you the severity, you get a proof of contact. It basically makes sure that you understand what is in the code. And once you've seen the alert, you can go over here and either dismiss it for whatever reason, and you can state what reason it is. So some of the reasons include a fix has already been started, there's no bandwidth to fix it, the risk is tolerable, the alert is not correct, and vulnerable code is not actually used. So that way, it's basically checking that you know what's going on in your repository. So going back to the code scanning, we can see here within our code basically the problems, the potential vulnerabilities. And if we click on one, it basically tells you where it's found, what you can do to remediate. This one, let's see if one of the other ones explains this a bit better. Yeah, basically in this page, that's where you find all the information about the alerts that.
That one's quite brief. Some of them give real good
Yeah.
explanations. I'm quite surprised that
Let's see.
unfortunately we picked that.
Let's try this one. This one as well. So most of the time you get proper chunks of I think because this is a demo sort of repository that was set up, it doesn't really show that much of the details. But normally in this area you would find proper details about the alerts. But moving on, in secret scanning, we can see here that there's an API key that was found. It tells you the location of it, it tells you how to fix it, and also if you have checked all this and you see and you know that it's in there, you can close it, revoke it. You can say that it's been used for production or in tests. It's non-production. You can say it's a false positive, and you can say it's not relevant to fix. And the thing is, when you close it with a specific reason, for example, if you close it with the reason of maybe tests, whenever it's scanning again, it wouldn't bring up that same secret because you've already told it that you're aware that it's in your repository. So that is how it's done in GitHub. Now I'll show you the Azure DevOps equivalent. So with Azure DevOps, so to turn it on, I think I'll start off with showing you how to turn it on in Azure DevOps. Security. So with this one, you can turn it on at the organization level, the repository level. So I have this organization, and if I go into it, and you can also turn it on at the project level. So with the organization level, if you go to organization settings, under repositories, you would see here it's as simple as just toggling this off or on. And when you switch it on, if you switch it on here, it would start checking all the new projects that come in to your organization. But if you switch it on from enable all, it will check like what exists already in the organization. And if you look at the screen here, it tells you how many committers you have. So that way you already have an idea of how much billing you are going to, how much billing is needed to turn it on for your organization. So if I just begin, then at the project level, to turn it on is go into project settings, repositories, select your repository, and you turn it on from here. And when you turn it on, it automatically enables push protection, and push protection basically means that it's a secret scanning feature, and as well as checking for secrets that are already in your code, it also stops secrets from being added to your code. So before you even push the code to your repository, you get a notification that there is a secret in this code. So that way nothing really gets to fly over your head. And again, you can revoke it, or you can, acknowledge it. Then for dependency scanning and code scanning, that is done via pipelines.
Just one question.
Yes.
Does the setting has to be turned on at the organization level to be able to use at the project level, or we can directly do it at the project level?
Yeah.
So if you just wanted to trial it, just start with a very small project.
We just go there and try to
Yeah.
do it. Okay, that's good.
So to show the other ones, I will use one of our already set up organizations that are quite populated already. So with this one, we can see in the advanced security tab, which is under repos, all the alerts. So the dependency, the code scanning, and the secret alert. But to turn on dependency and code scanning, you have to set it up as a pipeline. Now why this is quite easy is we have pipeline templates. So if you want to make a new one, it has it almost set up for you. So in this assistant, we have the pipeline for dependency scanning, and if you just click on that, it adds what's needed to initialize code QL, and you can do it for different languages. So if I want to do it for Python, okay, select code scanning, and then if you add it, it puts that all in for you. That's the initialization and the actual analysis. Yeah, so this just makes the pipeline, setting up the pipeline quite easy. And so now if we look at what it's actually showing us based on this repository, so here, very similar to GitHub, in fact, the same as GitHub. It gives you a description of what was found, the dependencies that was found. And again, it shows you the severity, and you can close it as you wish. Then in code scanning, the same. See, this is what I mean. It gives you a very, in-depth description. It gives you a recommendation, example code as well. So not just telling you what to do, it shows you possible ways of doing it. So I think with this, it's very easy to, stay on top of all the potential security threats. And I think why this helps is it also teaches the developer what to look out for. So it's not just left to the security team. This is now a responsibility of everyone in every phase of the software development lifecycle. And the same as secrets, it shows you a loose password. So it shows you information about that, where it's been found. So this is all the locations of that secret, remediation steps, recommendations as well. So yeah, I think that's all about security. Does
Just
anyone have any?
one more slide to do, and then
Okay.
So cutting into drinking time, aren't we?
So any questions on that before?
Just a couple of things. So first of all, great presentation as well. But you mentioned license checking before as well in Copilot itself. Does it also do citation checking as well? As in checking to see if the code, if someone's just like basically copying basic code, from an open source, the license may not account.
So is it using code that you shouldn't be using? Is that?
Not so much that, but basically someone's like copying and pasting potentially our IP that may not be covered, that may not have like an associated license file that you picked up. So I appreciate it might be an edge case. I'm just curious.
So, I mean, there is a slide that kind of talks. So nowhere in the learning model do we have code that kind of exists that we can just copy. If you know how these learning models work, is like you kind of when you've got like a sentence, it predicts the next word, and then it predicts. Code is exactly the same. So it's predicting the code kind of token by token, rather than getting a whole chunk of code and cutting and pasting in that so it already exists.
It was more around sort of like the analysis stuff, because you mentioned before around like the license checking, so I'm guessing it might be a similar functionality to that, but no problem, you don't know the answer now. So I was curious.
Yeah, I mean, can we just flip back to one of the slides?
No worries.
I think we've come to the outlet slide. Don't know if it's still there.
No problem.
Yeah, I won't labour on that. I don't really know the answer.
And
I do know that we do not have like reams of code that it just cuts and pastes in. It very much is using kind of patterns to, it kind of understands patterns of code, and it builds up. When it's making the prompts, it's building it up kind of token by token, rather than just cut and paste known code.
That's great, thank you.
Just got one question I can.
Yeah.
I just want to know, when you were doing the Copilot, you were typing those prompts.
Yeah.
So, if there is a developer in the team, what kind of learning curve are you talking about to become because there's a term in the industry, prompt engineer.
Yeah.
Is it like you can easily learn that, or with a few training, or you go with the job and try to do it yourself? So
I know we have got a kind of like a little bit of, like we call it managed IP, where we'll actually get to kind of training on how to do it. I think most developers just kind of work out what kind of works. There isn't that, I think chat has changed there, because when Copilot first came out, chat didn't exist, and so you had to kind of prompt it with comments or the name of your function. I think chat's made it a lot easier to have a kind of conversation and kind of encourage that prompt, you know. So I think it's really changed the way.
Do you think both will be supported, but if not, it will just end up just being chat?
I think both will exist. I think more people will gravitate to using chat, but I don't think they'll take the other one away.
Where is GitHub Copilot going? What are the, I guess, the next
So
roadmap?
maybe this is the slide. So GitHub University is the kind of the flagship conference that GitHub have every year. So in November we just had it. A couple of things that we've kind of announced. There's a new scoop of it called Copilot Enterprise, and this is the one where you can actually train it on your code. Now it's only for your use, but that you can go into your code bases and actually say, I want you to use this as part of the modeling, the training, so it will train up in your code. We're also kind of building Copilot chat into the web interfaces as well. So it's not just in the editor tool, it's actually going to be in the place where you're kind of working and collaborating. And a couple of places that is really good is when you're doing a commit, a pull request. How many people do a pull request and all they do is they type, I've updated it, you know, and then someone comes along and it's meaningless. So we're actually now getting it to write the pull request for you, you know, and I've seen an example and it writes a decent explains what's actually happened. So that's, and then the other one is kind of helping you write the code to resolve a security flaw that it finds. You know, get it actually to do the, you know, get Copilot to write it for you.
Yeah, so it's a bit like when in the tests when you sort of said make it more robust, is that kind of thing for security. So
Yeah, it's going to
fix the security.
Yeah. So when so when advanced security detects that, you know, you've got a SQL injection attack, it can help you write that code. And then the other thing is they're starting to connect it with other developer tools. So the example they showed was using Copilot with Postman. Another third-party tool. So yeah. So cool. Okay. I think we're done. We've cut into drinking time, so we probably should start.
Yeah. So first of all, so we all just say thank you very much to Mark and Juanita for that. We obviously had all the features of a real demo there, rather than a pre-canned. Let's play the video of it. But actually, some of the things you can see the real power of what's going on in there. So thanks a lot for that. Thanks a lot to everyone for turning up. But this event wouldn't have been possible without Gemma at the back there organised everything, so thank you, Gemma. And also, you may have also had Rowan sort of haranguing you and saying, are you really coming as well? So a couple of things to look out for. We were thinking of doing a webinar in December for what our top 10 tech things of 2023 from our perspective was. I think we're going to drop that as a video instead, so just keep a look out for that. In a couple of weeks we'll just drop a 15-minute video on what our top 10 is. In January we are going to do a webinar, again in conjunction with Microsoft, around ultimate guide to, ultimate Logic Apps best practice guide, which we're really excited about. And then 29th of February, we've got penciled in our next event, subject to be confirmed. It might even be here, but if you're at loose end on the 29th of February, which let's face it, if you've got a recurring appointment, it's never going to be on the 29th of February, so you should all be free. But that is a Thursday, so you're all welcome to come back then, and we'll have drinks and nibbles and another presentation. So on that, thanks all for coming. We can all yeah, we're back upstairs where we all came in, and let's have a quick drink and a chat and see. You hanging around?
Yeah, I will be
so
around.
if any other questions that you want to ask Mark and Juanita, then they're going to hang around for a bit as well. So on that note, let's wrap up and move upstairs.